Roswell Economic Action Committee. You all, let me just say from the get-go, you all have done a great job. You have gone above and beyond certainly my expectations. And I feel that we are so fortunate to have such a group of people with your expertise. It's awesome. And I say to people all the time, I just said it in a State of the City address today, that one of the greatest benefits we have in Roswell is the engaged, articulate, intelligent people of Roswell that are more than willing to lean in and do the heavy lifting. So thank you. And what we're going to do here this evening is I'm going to turn it over to the East Roswell Economic Action Committee. I'll turn it over to the chair and ask him to introduce the members, and then I'll let them take it from there. And what we thought might be the best way to go about this is that we would cover broad topics and stop and ask if council has any questions as we go through it. I'll open it up at the end to the public for questions and comments. But then I also would like to let everyone know that on March 2nd at 6:30, we are planning an open forum in East Roswell at the East Roswell Community Center. Like I said, it's March 2nd at 6:30, and so that will be open to the public as well for questions and answers. We've got the room reserved for about 2.5 hours, so we would encourage the public to meet there as well to get questions answered or additional questions, additional comments, and because I think that this committee has a lot of great things to bring forward to us and a lot of great ideas and information that we as the city of Roswell need to mull over, as well as the citizens of Roswell. So having said that, Mr. Trent Perry, would you please take it over?
I'm Trent Perry. I'm fortunate to serve as a chairman for the committee for the last year, and I'll be presenting our report. First, let me introduce Tim. We'll start with, I'll go around like this and just introduce yourself quickly in a snippet of what you do so that we know where you are and maybe promote your business. And that. Tim Stevens.
Tim Stevens, owner of From the Earth Brewing Company in Roswell, the east side of Roswell. I also live on the east side of Roswell, and I was very happy to be involved in this committee.
Ron?
Ron Buckley, Vice Chairman, and I'm with Bricksmore Property Group, which is our shopping center owner. We moved our regional offices next to the PGA on the east side of Roswell, so our office is right next to Tim. And I live on the west side of Roswell.
Steve Stroud, I'm Executive Director of Roswell, Inc. I moved here in 1976 and lived on the east side until 1990.
My name is Amanda Reedy. My husband and I co-own together a healthcare real estate firm called Crown Tenant Advisors, regionally based boutique firm. And I am a mom of 3, elementary, middle, and high school, and we live on the east side of Roswell.
Andy McGarry, I live in Horseshoe Bend, and I'm in commercial real estate. My wife is in residential real estate, and we've lived in the city 25 years, so we're big supporters of what's going on.
Again, I'm Trent Perry. I've lived in Roswell. It wasn't Roswell when I moved here, but 1987. We moved into Willow Springs and been there ever since, the east side. I've been in business myself for 35 years, retired now. This is fun stuff.
Bruce Kellogg. I am on my own, BK Consulting. I've been in the appraisal business since '72, so figure it out. Worked at the big banks in New York, where I'm from. Worked at CBRE, worked at Cushman & Wakefield, and a bunch of other places along the way. And lived in Horseshoe Bend since '89.
Okay, and let me just thank all of these members because they're such, as the mayor said, such a qualified group, and it's been fun to work with them. Difficult sometimes. I'm just. No, it's been a lot of work. You know, we started in Our first meeting was early February of last year. We went through a couple of months of building the organization, and then we spent over 8 months of pretty hard work. A lot of regular meetings, a lot of small group meetings, a lot of reading, which I'll mention our reading list and our research base that we used in a few minutes. And everyone rolled up their sleeves and did what they had to do. And I'm privileged to work with such a diverse and talented group of people and hardworking. Also, I want to take a minute just to thank the staff that supported us. Olivia Taylor from the administration area, Karen Koiwat, I can't remember her last name.
Why not?
I'm sorry. They have been incredible, and all the, from community development, Alice and Steve was really, really helpful to us, and of course, Gary Palmer. So it's been a very good experience. We wanted to do a lot more, but we didn't have time. Maybe we could in the future, I don't know, but we're willing to help as hopefully a lot of this gets implemented, digested and evaluated by the residents and the governing body, and we move forward in making some significant changes to our east side economic potential. And so what I want to do is, I'd like to have the report pulled up if I could, Marley. So I'm going to walk through the report. I won't bore you by reading every word. I want to just kind of scan through some of the major points, and we'll scroll through the report as we go through it. I'm confident that you've read it. If you have specific questions about, okay, right there, about any specific recommendations that we have made from the council members initially, as the mayor said, and then perhaps the audience later, we'll stop and deal with them as we go through the report. I'll try to make it brief, and I'll just read off some of my key notes and try to touch on the major points. The report itself is broken primarily into 4 components, and what we tried to do is design the report format and substance around what we do in terms of our planning organization. The strategic plans or the comprehensive planning process in terms of how we address certain topics. The 4 major topics are planning, or economic planning and development, transportation, character areas, and community facilities. And so that's how we broke down the east side of Roswell into those 4 major components. And some of it's redundant and overlaps, but we tried to make it that way so that we could all relate to that, because when we live over on the east side, as we do, most of it, many of us, we look at it in terms of our character of life, in terms of transportation, which is the #1 issue sometimes, and other areas. So as I go through this, we'll go from topic to topic. And then we have 2 sub-presentations to go through today. One will be by Ron, and it will deal with the lost business that we have every day on the east side and have had for many years. We have a report that's quite highlighting of the scope and character of the business that we're losing because of some of the things we are not doing that we probably should be doing and have not been doing for a long time. The second sub-report will be by our subcommittee for the Centennial Node, as we call it, and that will be a pretty significant report dealing with a recommendation we want the council to consider, and Amanda and Tim and Andy will be dealing with that presentation, and we have a slide for that too. So we're going to move through this as quickly as you want us to, and we'll go from there. Now, let's begin by and go right page to 15 if you can. Right page to 15. We did some research and was assisted by staff in terms of the resource information that we needed to digest. Now, 15 on the yeah, right, yeah. We needed to know more than we did. We weren't experts in economic development for Roswell or in what Roswell had done over the last many years. So we went back with the assistance of staff, and we identified a lot of the major studies that have been done over the years, all the way back to 2005, with regard to what needed to be done in the city of Roswell in order to promote economic development. And those are the studies, the documents that we have listed up there. And then there are other resources that we used in terms of videos and archives. We didn't get to a lot of those, but we did, for the most part, go through most all of those documents above, which tells you we did a lot of work outside of our meetings. And I'm very appreciative of all that work. The major documents that we found most value in, and if there's others that you all want to mention on the committee, mention it, but there were a couple of major documents that we felt were most significant to us. One was the Holcomb Bridge Road East Revitalization Study, 2005. Very extensive study that was done many years ago, and frankly, it was left in draft form. It was, to my best of my knowledge, it was never finalized, but it contained tremendous content from our perspective. It dealt with a lot of the issues you're going to hear from us today in terms of recommendations and problems that we see today that was also acknowledged to some extent back in those days. And I don't know how many years after we were annexed that was, and the east side was annexed, but it was done not too many years after the annexation of the east side of Roswell. So we have to wait on that, yeah. You can correct me later. 5 years? Oh, okay. That was easy. So that was done 5 years after annexation, based on audience input. Thank you. I thought it was longer. So my guess is the city realized a lot more issues than what they thought they bought. So anyway, we'll go into that in a few minutes. The next two most significant studies that I think we drew the most out of was Strategic Economic Development Plan of 2012, which created Roswell, Inc., and a lot of the contemporary economic development infrastructure that we use today. And then the Strategic Economic Development Plan 2.0, which brings us up to today in terms of the implementation strategy that the city's administering or working with in Roswell, Inc. Today. Retail study key findings we also used to some extent, and Ron will present an extension of that study in a little bit. We looked also at the City 2535 Comprehensive Plan, which is about to be updated, I think, pretty soon, right? This year, and I'd like to see all of us involved as much as possible in that process. We hope to be able to contribute to that process because I think it's important to the work that we've done so far. And that pretty much relates to most. Oh no, and then the East Roswell Vision Survey was tremendously valuable to us. Now that survey was done in 2017 by Community Relations, I believe. The problem with it is that it had not been condensed into final findings or analysis or recommendations and so forth from that. It's in raw form. It had attracted, I think, 1,300 responses from East Side residents to 2 questions. I only went through 1 question, but the vision that people had about the Holcomb Bridge Road East Corridor in the east side of Roswell is the 1 question that we really analyzed, and we broke it down into major findings. And it highlighted the top 5 most significant problems in the east side based on resident perceptions. Very valuable stuff. Number 1 problem, anybody guess what it was? Traffic. Number 2 problem, apartments. So just to let you know, it probably is a good semblance of what the people are thinking. So, and then the next site studies, I think, is an extension of the 2017 retail studies, which is what Ron will present to you today with regard to some of the lost retail business and other types of businesses that we're losing right now based on some of the issues. So let's begin by moving into, and the departments that we benefited from was administration, community development, Roswell, Inc., and then a consulting firm that we used extensively and had hoped to get them here today, but just too much for too little time was RKG Consultants, and we're hoping to maybe bring them back at another time. The data that they have on our economy is incredible. Let me begin by going through the parts of this report, and I'll run through it. If council members have any questions, stop me, and we'll go from there. Or if the members of our committee want to embellish on some of the points, let's do that. But let's keep it as timely as necessary because we've got a limited time frame. The Strategic Economic Development Plan, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, has a phrase in it that caught my interest and others. It says you're either growing or you're declining in terms of economic development. And the problem that we found as we went through this is that we don't see the east side growing that much. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's losing a lot of business. The study, economic development study that I've referenced, indicates that also Roswell is probably in significant need of expanding. This is Greater Roswell, not East Side, and I'm just doing this because the same thing holds true on the East Side, of not expanding their commercial real estate, the office products and so forth as much as they probably should be. We're too reliant from a tax revenue standpoint on residential property taxes and increased values and sales taxes. So that reinforces some of the things we're going to be mentioned earlier in the sense that study indicates that we have a significant need for larger companies, offices, more jobs and employment opportunities for higher income individuals and so forth. And so I only mention that. Doesn't say that our economy is not successful. It is. It's a very strong economy, but it needs to probably grow in other directions. And I think we all acknowledge that. Right now, if you take a look at the business, and I think one of the things we also found that's a weakness to some extent is that we have more emphasis on growing small businesses than we do larger companies, or we have more success growing small businesses than larger companies. And that also can be seen in some of the numbers. For example, based on a Reference USA business database, we have about 5,500 businesses in Roswell, with 92% employing less than 20 employees, another 6% employing less than 50 employees, and the remaining 2% employ more than 50. Now, I think we differ from some of your stats in the sense that the 50 or more, or 50 or less is a little bit of a different percentage in your numbers, and I don't know how to reconcile that right now. But that tells you that we have a tremendous density of small businesses. Not that that's bad, but when you take a look at that in terms of employment opportunities, it creates a lot of problems for us. One more point about the small businesses. 35% of those small businesses are home-based businesses. That's a lot of home-based businesses, which could amount to 1, 2, maybe employees. And so that's a significant factor also. East Roswell has about 40% of the residents of the city of Roswell, but East Roswell only has about 1,600 employers. So we have a significantly small percentage of the total employers, of 5,500 employers in Roswell on the east side. That's a problem in many cases because it doesn't offer a lot of job opportunities. Now, one of the demographic characteristics of Roswell, as you see in the bottom paragraph, is that we have about 60% of our adult residents that have a 4-year college degree or more. And those are people who also need something above the typical average income of a typical worker, the average worker in this country, or this city. So that means that not because we don't have a lot of larger companies who would typically employ higher income individuals, we have approximately, based on one of the studies, 41,000 residents that commute outside the city for work every day. 41,000 people leaving every morning and coming back every night. That adds a lot of traffic, needless to say. That also, as we'll learn in a few minutes, that creates a lot of lost revenue because they spend all day outside the city with lunch and happy hour and all the other types of things. So daytime revenues are significantly shortcoming. And we'll get into this a little bit more as we get deeper. One of the most significant economic assets that the city has is the 400 Holcomb Bridge Old Alabama interchange. That's highlighted in almost every study that we picked up and read, and it has been for 15 years. It's been highlighted as the most significant economic development asset that this city has, and unfortunately, it hasn't been developed as much as its capacity for development would provide for. And that is a major problem as we see it, and we'll get into that in terms of recommendations in a little bit. But again, almost every single study highlights that problem area, that just hasn't been taken advantage of by the city. Also, the North Fulton, again, in that same light, the North Fulton, the 400 Holcomb Bridge exit, to expand even further, is so underdeveloped when you take a look at it and compare it with the other exits on 400 in North Fulton County. We still have a gas station on every corner, almost. We have a restaurant on a multi-million dollar piece of property. There's just a lot of lost opportunity in that particular interchange. Next, also, one of the things that the city has done that is questionable is that we have added a significant, again, the number 2 problem based on the Vision survey is we've added significant number of multifamily residential renter-occupied apartments over the last several years on the east side. Presently, we have, with the new Target development, we will have 9,000 renter-occupied multifamily apartments on the east side. At the same time, we have 8,200 single-family owner-occupied residential units on the east side. That's a significant imbalance to the rest of Roswell on the west side and to many of our neighboring cities in terms of the percentage of renter-occupied housing versus owner-occupied housing. That creates a perception, I think, on the part of our residents based on the survey, the Vision survey, that it jeopardizes the quality of life. Again, that's the resident surveys that I mentioned earlier. It just jeopardizes their perception of the quality of life, and there's just high density on the east side. I think the west side of Roswell comparatively has approximately 38% and renter-occupied housing, and the balance is single-family owner-occupied housing. That's a significant difference, and so that is an issue that we have concern, and so too many residents have also. Looking at solutions to this economic planning and development overview, we feel that the number 1 priority that we need to address in terms of total revenue input to the city would be the Holcomb Bridge 400 Old Alabama redevelopment, transportation enhancements, which we'll get into in a few minutes, and then what we call character nodes upgrades. And we'll get to that in a minute. It may be that transportation becomes more important than the Holcomb Bridge 400 Old Alabama to have a means to an end in terms of economic growth on the east side, but that's a matter of decision-making and economics for the city to understand or to decide on, okay? They understand it very well. One of the things we think that's important, because we have such a small amount of small businesses on the east side, they're struggling, and it's difficult on the east side to do business, and we'll get into why, the transportation and other issues. We believe the city should provide a more proactive business support relationship to some of these east side business owners. We feel that a lot of them, well, we've learned from them directly that a lot of them have not been contacted by anybody in the city except for their licensing and taxes, and I think that we could assist some of these business owners and developers in other ways in terms of marketing, analysis, support, merchant associations, and those types of things. So I won't go any farther into that. And before we have Ron introduce his study, I'd like to just make a couple of points on the retail business that we have on the business on the east side. Again, we have a small representation of businesses on the east side, but we lose a lot of business during the daytime. We have a rich consumer market. You know, the people that live on the east side have a lot of money to spend. I read in the One Economic Report that retail business, residents, households of East Roswell spend 30% more than resident households of Alpharetta on retail purchases. So, and that's because we're older. and we have more money, I guess, I don't know. But so the retail market in Roswell should be richer than and more profitable than we now experience. Only 26% of the total city revenues of private sector businesses, which is about $3.5 billion in terms of private sector business revenue, only about 26% comes from the east side businesses. So we are really underperforming based on our population level. So, and because we're losing a lot of business, and again, part of that's the reason because so many people commute outside the city. Ron, let's take it from there, and you explain where the business is going. Okay. And one of the things that we have been able to do, and Ron will get into this in a minute, is based on new technologies, we can show where our residents live and where they shop for certain things. And it's absolutely astounding how the numbers fall out.
Thanks.
We're going to do the retail study now. The next one, right here. Great. If you have any questions, stop me. I'm moving pretty fast.
Yeah.
I think this company was referred to us, Steve, by George.
Right, oh,
Next
yeah.
slide.
Yeah, this is a partnership that Roswell Inc. has had for the last 3 years.
Right.
With studying different nodes of the city on retail.
Got started with the original retail study in 2018, right? And it's evolved all the way through, and this is a new dimension of the technology.
Yeah, this is where we, as a committee, drilled down further just on the east side.
Right.
With the help of Brixmore.
Okay.
Yep. So what happened, next I did a present with the committee, they came in last fall, maybe October or November, and they've been doing it for several years with the city of Roswell. So City of Roswell hires them. And they did a presentation on the whole city of Roswell. So I was sitting here and we talked to Andy after the thing. We said, can you do a more extensive study just on the east side for free for us? Could you kind of run your numbers, do the different nodes? And he said, sure. So he just came up with this last month. So this is
fresh.
This is a very new report. And it's based on new technologies, basically from your cell phone. So what they do is they track your cell phones on where you go and where you shop. So you'll see at the end of this report, it will show how many people walk into Kroger on the east side, or both Krogers actually, or it will show like the west side Kroger, and it will rank them from 1 to 48. So it will say this one's number 1 in foot traffic. It's all on foot traffic, it's sales. So it tracks who goes into those stores. You'll also see it has the Home Depot on the east side, how many people walk in the door compared to other Home Depots, and it will show the Publix, how many people go into the Publix on the east side compared to other Publixes. So it will kind of give you some real information that really wasn't available before, because the retailers really wouldn't tell you what they would do. They're very secretive about that, but this is all data. Now, the other thing that it does is it shows where people go from there. So let's say if you're at the intersection of Old Alabama and where else do you shop? Where else do you go to shop? Do you go to Alpharetta? Do you go to Perimeter? Do you go to Stone Mountain? Do you go to whatever? So we just got this information. It's just another data point, to say, okay, it's not going to solve all the problems, but it's going to tell you how people do, and maybe why what they do it, and what can we do to change it, kind of thing. But it just basically shows the traffic pattern. So,
and the other thing that Ron can add to it is this is what the developers look at. This is also the data that is used by retailers, so a Kroger or a Home Depot, to decide whether they're going to put a new store in a location. They're using this data right here to sign leases.
So that to make that point even clearer is that when you look at our market, our consumer market, and all these homes, 24,000 plus homes in the east side, And even though that market can support all kinds of businesses, large and small, big box, small, if the developer looks at this, or the retail chain, and they look at that, they see all that business leaving. They see it leaving. It goes to other areas. So even though we live here in this area, that doesn't mean the business is going to be successful. That means it's lost opportunity, and why invest all that money if it's not going to happen, for other reasons that it could happen. So anyway, go ahead.
Exactly. So we could go through, it's pretty comprehensive report, so we'll just try to hit the highlights of it, because I know we don't have all night.
Right,
But
thanks.
the only thing on this one is this just talked about a demographic change on the population. If you look at East Roswell, it only grew by 0.38%, where the other areas grew by 2.4, 2.5. But it's interesting, the average household values went up quite a bit in East Roswell. The average went up almost 19%, 474 to 567. So that's a good sign for the East Roswell, that the homes went up really comparably to the other sides of Roswell. Actually, values went up. You can switch to the next one. This is just one of the nodes that we're going to look at. So we can go to the next site. This just basically says, like at Holcomb Bridge in Old Alabama, it kind of breaks it down by each intersection as we go. So we'll see like what happens on the east side, what happens on the west side, north side of the intersection, and south side. This one will show basically where the home location, like if from that location right there, to the left is where people live. So that's their home location for mobile mapping. So the people that go to that intersection, that's kind of where they live on that map right there. And the one on the right is where people work. So people from here do work at Perimeter, they work at Buckhead, they work at downtown. So it kind of shows you, if you're at that intersection at that day, where are you going to? This one is an interesting one. You can't quite read it, but the takeaways here is basically what it says is, where do people, on the top left one, you see where it says apparel, shopping, favorite places to shop, and where do people like to dine, and where do people like to grocery shop? So what that's saying is that people that go to that intersection, what do they do? And the interesting thing about it was, probably the biggest takeaway here was, on the east side of this intersection, of even right here, the number one, go down there, go down to the bottom right, the number one location that people go grocery shopping, I'm sorry, good. Right there, I'm sorry, see
Almost. There you go. There you
the
go.
top right quadrant right there?
Yeah.
You see it says Kroger at Holcomb Bridge Road and Eves right there? If you look at the top right of that right there, yeah, right there. The number one place where people actually go grocery shopping is Buford Highway Farmers Market. If you live east of just barely Old Alabama, people go from the people that live there, they shop all the way at Buford Highway
Or they shop at work,
Farmers Market.
come home from work.
They could be working over there and shopping over
Right.
there. That's an interesting thing. So you think people go to Publix, they're going to, Walmart. So people are actually shopping it east of our center from that intersection. And the Holcomb Bridge in Eves is not even in the top 5, the Kroger right there. So people don't even shop from Old Alabama.
Bottom,
Yeah, that will show this here.
It'll show it.
So this is just a next node. If you could switch the page here.
That's a 6-month period, right? Prior means 6 months ago, post is 6 months afterwards.
This is an important.
What's that?
No, I think it's prior to, like, going to the location and then leaving from the location. I don't think it's a time frame.
Yeah.
This just shows like where from people at that intersection, where do they go? They go to Centennial High School, they go to Home Depot, they go to East Village, and where, or did, yeah. And then you could go to the next one. This just shows you where those people trade areas,
How
kind of
long they
summarize.
stay.
This is 80% of the visitors that go to the Kroger live within 2 miles. So it's not drawing a great distance. All the people that are walking in that door with that cell phone live very closely to. So you don't get a big radius, you don't get a very big draw. So people east of there aren't coming over, and people west of there aren't coming over to the Kroger.
The reason for that is there's a border of 400 and the river. So typically, when you have a location and you're looking at retail, you're looking at a general radius to pull that retail in, which explains probably why Target or Kohl's were unsuccessful,
Correct.
because you have the river and you have a border in 400, correct?
Yep.
That's
And you got,
correct.
if you keep going east on Holcomb Bridge, you got the river, and so it's a natural trade barrier, so everyone over the river stays over, Gwinnett. They don't want to drive over the river to
Corners.
go to
Dinwiddie.
East Roswell. And the people who live north of the center, you'll see the map, they shop up at the public, they go to North Point Mall. If you live only a mile or two north,
Or
you don't,
Haynes
or Haynes
Bridge.
Bridge, so you go north on the old Alabama grocery store or go to the mall.
As
So
I recall too, there's a lot of people that shop at the Costco's and the big boxes.
Correct.
Outside.
Yeah, plus, I think that Kroger is not a destination place. Costco it is, Buford Farmers Market is, the Gap Farmers Market it is, but Kroger is not. Kroger is almost like a convenience store.
Yep,
You
neighborhood.
go to Kroger because it's right there.
That's a lot of
And
their
most grocery stores are. Most grocery stores only have a 2 to 3 mile radius, and people go grocery shopping, and they go
Maybe
home.
Trader
Whatever's
Joe's,
convenient.
Sprouts are more destination.
Yep.
But Kroger, Publix are kind of convenience. So
Go to the next one. So this is Holcomb Bridge and Eves. This is a little bit about the travelers, the distance, how many people, they go within 2 miles to most people shop that live within 2 miles. You go to the next one. This is again where people live, their home locations, and where they work. You can tell like during the night where they're sleeping, because the cell phone goes silent, and so they know where you live and they know where you work. It's kind of crazy, but so that's kind of the map from that intersection.
Just imagine how much lost business that is. That's a lot of business.
Again, the favorite grocery store from that intersection is Buford Highway Farmers Market. That's where people go grocery shopping for this intersection. That's pretty much the biggest kind of trend on that one also.
Chick-fil-A.
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 Chick-fil-A
Stop
pretty
at
much is
Chick-fil-A.
number one in
Everywhere.
most markets you go to, they're the number one volume, fast food restaurant. But it does show that people go to Macy's at, apparel shopping at North Point or at Perimeter. The next, you go to the next one right here. This is the former Target. This shows people, you can go to the next one also. This basically shows you where people live and people where they work from that intersection. People that are crossing that intersection. Similar to the other ones, there's not that much of a difference as far as where people work. This one is also interesting. The number one grocery store here is Walmart. Again, Buford Farmers Market is number 3, where people go grocery shopping that live on the east side. Chick-fil-A is pretty, and then if you keep going down to Nesbitt Ferry intersection,
Well, and the food court at North Point is also number 1. on
yeah.
Yeah.
It just shows you the whole, see, you can go to the next one. You go to the next one also. Again, it's going to be a similar heat map on where people live from Nesbitt Ferry and where people work. Go to the next one. It's interesting. This one has a little different. The farther east you go, people shop at Marshall's at Satellite Boulevard. So once you get to the way east side of Roswell, people are actually shopping in Gwinnett. They're not necessarily going up to the North Point.
Yep.
The Cheesecake Factory is one of the top restaurants at North Point that people go to Cheesecake Factory that live on the east side of Roswell. Interesting, on the grocery stores, 2 of the top 5 are actually Buford Highway, surprisingly to me, is the number 1 grocery store that people go to on the east side of Roswell. And number 4 is the DeKalb Farmers Market. So people that live on East Roswell those are their 2 top grocery stores. They go all the way to DeKalb Farmers Market, and the Buford Highway is number 1, and DeKalb Market is number 4.
We also have a lot of demographics mixed in here too, both rental, apartment complex tenants, working different locations, and
I think that's part of it.
So there's a lot of
Farther east
demographics.
Roswell you go, the more demographic
Right.
diversity you have, and they want to go to the farmers markets. It's interesting. And you could go to the next slide. And this is great, because he was able to kind of like really go to by intersection where people are going. these are the favorite places for all 4 nodes. This is the favorite places that people like to go. And all of East Roswell, where they go to IKEA, they track their cell phones to Home Goods at North Point. Different home, with leisure, they like to go to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Atlantic Station. Shopping is Avalon, North Point Market Center, and the supermarkets that they go to. Which is kind of, I think that's, I would have guessed that anyways.
Yeah.
There are some, but the next one is interesting. This shows the foot traffic in East Roswell, rankings by foot traffic for each of the grocers, each of the retailers. So Kroger, interesting enough, is in the lowest 5 percentile. So in the United States, and in Georgia, you see where it's 167 stores, it's 161st store, and then within a 15-mile radius, it's 46th out of 48. So which is in the bottom 6%. So they do not do very well in sales and foot traffic. And then it's able to do it on every, like the Publix there, similar. It's in the bottom 25 percentile. In Georgia, it's 33%, and then in a 5-mile radius, it's a 15-mile radius, it's 45%. And the Home Depot, unfortunately, is also on the foot traffic is 27% foot, percentile, which is on the lower side. So not good foot traffic, not good foot traffic for anything, and that was what's going to drive any retailers there or retailer to close. A retailer could definitely be at risk here to say, I want to open up another store. But I think this is great information too.
Right.
And then the next one is interesting. It's got unique characteristics of each node. The old Alabama intersection. This is where people kind of go. Bloomingdale's, Dillard's, Nordstrom's, Whole Foods. Eves Roads, people like to go to Antico Pizza in Avalon. Buford Highway, Farmers Market, Studio Movie Grill, Fox Theater, East Roswell, Recreation Center, and Piedmont Park. And then Holcomb Bridge Road, people actually go to Stone Mountain Park. The farther east you go to Roswell, instead of going to Centennial Park, they go to Stone Mountain Park. Same thing here with Nesbitt Ferry, where the people go there for entertainment is Trader Joe's, DeKalb Farmers Market, Stone Mountain Park, Studio Movie Grill, and Big Cinemas 8, which is actually in Gwinnett. It's over the river, so people there, that's where they go to the movie theaters. So it's just, they took this whole data, this guy, Andy, next side. So his thesis, basically, Andy, was that one of the reasons why a lot of the retailers don't do well is not only destination and where they go, it's just population base is not that strong compared to, there's natural trade barriers with the river. People north of there go shopping north, and people south of there are also at the river. So you just have and then you got traffic. So, we feel probably the number one thing is the traffic and the bridges. I think the bridges will solve a lot of these problems, but there's only so much you can do. We think the bridges, one thing we talked about is that with the 3 bridges at the city, one of the number one thing would be to do some enhancements to the bridges, that they make them look like the Alpharetta bridges, that they really are the centerpiece of Roswell, and that they're they're the gateway to Roswell. And when people come up 400, they're like, oh, this is Roswell. It looks like Roswell is historic, it's beautiful, and really to push that, it's a one-time opportunity to do these bridges and to do the bridges right, and to really encourage people to come into Roswell. That's what will connect East Roswell to West Roswell, is the bridges. That's how
shop on both
you can
sides.
shop. Right now, it's kind of a divider, and you just got this node right there, so if you can connect the two, would be great. And then Anna's going to hit on, just other...
One of the final things he said, what's the highest and best use? What can we do? Food. That's all he said. He said, if you want to do something at Holcomb Bridge Road, the only thing I can see is food.
And the other things, too, we talked about is like hotels. If we get some hotels on the, do some incentives, get some hotels over there, that gets the overnight stays, which helps, Tim's restaurant. So some type of office building, office park, medical park, hotels, something with destination, because it's hard to get to, with the roads. Until the bridges are done, there's only so much you could do to get people to the east side of Roswell. And so there's other, those are the top things. The bridges, enhance them, hotels, and I know there's some community enhancements that Amanda's going to hit on too. Thanks.
I think
Just a comment and just hit on something that you said, is that if you strip away all the movement and the transportation, the actual demographics by the numbers is actually an attractive market.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
correct?
You know, there's still limited, that's something we could run, because I could run it like on the grocery stores, like you could run these things and say, like in a 1, 3, 5 mile radius, how many people live, like on all those stores that are ranked in the top 50, how many people are in a 1, 3, 5 mile radius? I could run that.
Right, yeah, I'd just be curious.
But compared to other areas, there's other areas with a lot more population, like, within a 2 mile, 2 minute or 2 mile or 3 mile, like that one was doing 2 mile radius. And there's not as many, it's like some populations, you got a neighborhood with, 2,000, 1,000 homes here and 1,000 homes there. But people are shopping in other areas. It's interesting information. It's a quagmire, and we're really trying to get the right information.
So if there's a message for all of us, it's shop and eat local.
That's the hope. The reality is,
It's not the reality, but it's something that we
Done?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Ron. I think the reality of all those statistics reinforces the fact that, what the other studies have pointed out for a long time, is that even though we have very strong market demographics on the east side, high-income households, age groups, a lot of consumption, a lot of that consumption is not done on the east side. And that's very problematic. And that was pointed out back in 2005. And part of the reason that some of the studies have pointed to that trend is that the Holcomb Bridge corridor is not considered by many residents on the east side as the optimum shopping area of choice. They prefer to shop in some other areas. And I think North Point Mall has changed that forever for us. When they developed North Point Mall, they took a lot of retail business away from the east side and the rest of Roswell. And I don't know that we've ever recovered. And the problem too is, which the studies point out, especially the 2005 revitalization study, is that the study, and we're getting ahead of ourselves, but that's okay, we have to go there anyway. The study points out that if we made some changes to the aesthetics, and the survey says this too, the vision survey, our residents feel that if the aesthetics were improved along the Holcomb Bridge corridor to make it look more like the west side of Roswell, up Crossville and so forth, that there would be more people prone to do their shopping, regular shopping, in this area. And so that, in addition to the fact that we don't have jobs within the city that attracts the well-educated workers, professionals, they have to commute outside the city. So not only are they struggling to get through the traffic to work and back home and do convenient shopping on the east side, they're not doing the preferred high-end shopping on the east side, which is part of the reason our big box stores have not done well. Had I think we really paid attention to the 2005 study that projected a real problem with high-end shopping, big box stores, because of the aesthetics and the shoppability of the Holcomb Bridge corridor, before Kohl's and Target came here, that might not have happened. They might not have failed as much. I think they looked at the raw demographics and the market potential. They didn't see the reality, and so they invested heavily, and it just didn't last. Does that make sense, Steve?
Yep.
Okay, and so that's part of the issue we face as a city. In order to make that east side a more shoppable arena, market to meet the needs of our high-income households and low-income households, we need to make that overall corridor more attractive to the typical consumer in many different ways. And we'll get into the transportation area, and most of that's transportation-driven, I think. And the studies say this too. So let's finish just a couple more points on economic development, and then we'll get into transportation, because we're on the cusp of what the issues are as raised in some of these studies. Any questions? Okay. Again, the committee supports the 90-day moratorium that the council just enacted on apartments. That was a part of the vision survey issue on apartments. And just to kind of also, because what we're suggesting in our recommendations throughout the body of this report is certainly very expensive to the city. And we didn't take price into consideration whatsoever, and we know what we're recommending as we go deeper in this report is incredibly challenging for the city. So we're asking not only that the recommendations that we are making here for improving our economic foundation or infrastructure in East Roswell, but that the city put a priority on a lot of the improvements that we're recommending. And as such, we know that it's going to create a lot of financial challenges, and we aren't qualified to make all the recommendations of how that's going to be addressed, but certainly alternatives like community improvement district, tax allocation district, downtown development authority, partnerships, special bonding, Georgia DOT, all kinds of different funding sources that could be tapped into should, I think, be pursued. One of the things that struck me as significant is that I'm not sure we've had any, and I don't know for sure, but I'm not sure that we've had any Georgia DOT major improvements in East Holcomb Bridge Road since I've lived there 34 years. Even though we have 45,000 vehicle trips per day, 13 million trips per year, times several decades, that's a lot of gas tax. So it would seem logical to me that GDOT would be able to invest something in upgrading our infrastructure, as we're going to talk about in a few minutes on the transportation recommendation. So that's just an observation that we've looked at. One more point, because of the small business area, we believe office condos are significantly viable in the east side because of small business density. Mixed-use zoning should be retail first floor, residential second and above. That as we begin to develop, we should probably consider parking garages rather than open lot parking areas to get more productivity out of our land. And again, shared office spaces for small businesses, and even some of the in-home offices might move out of the home into an office complex if we had those opportunities available. I think those are very viable on the east side. They aren't destination locations, but certainly some of these small office suites scattered throughout the east side are all occupied. And I think that it makes sense that we consider, as we look at ways to use additional land or to infill in these shopping complexes, those types of products might be very viable for us. Okay, let's talk about transportation with the residents. Anything about economic?
Sure, actually, if we go back up to 8.
Okay. Which one?
Number 8.
Okay.
Mixed use.
So basically, we actually, one of the code updates we have is to really restrict residential units being on the first floor. So for example, the Target that was approved that had a lot of residential on the first floor. So that is something we're working on. What I'm wondering and asking this group is, for the second half of it, there should also be a minimum requirement for general office space in mixed use as well. So if I'm interpreting that correctly, then what I'm doing is a recommendation from this body to the council is to create a document or something along those lines that says if a conditional use is requested for example, multifamily, then to be eligible to make that request, there'd be a requirement for office space. Am I understanding that correctly? Or
Yeah, one thing we brought up about
Yep.
that, almost all the developers or people that are looking at sites, they need density and they need height. And you have a 3-story height issue, and then they're asking always for a variance for 4 or 5 stories. And we really wanted to make it a statement in our study that if you gave them this height variance, there should be mixed use on the bottom, whether it's office or whether it's retail. I know in the Target, there was a minuscule tiny, minute bit of mixed use stuck in at the end, but we didn't think that was enough. And any of these sites you see coming along, they're going to need density, they're going to need height, and to give them height, we don't want it to be all apartments.
Yeah, and we talked about, I didn't capture all of it into the report, so that's the general thrust of what the committee felt, and we can revise that.
Steve, would you point out what our vacancy rate is in office throughout the city?
Office overall throughout the city is 94%. So we're doing extremely well on office. So we need office, but we've got to encourage what that looks like and where. Because the development of office is going to be key, what Trent's saying about bringing the right jobs. We have to have shovel ready. So for example, the Kimberly Clark project that went on the market in December. That's 100,000 square feet of Class A built, ready to go, that's being marketed. We've got people coming through looking at that every single week. But it's going to take the landlord to do exactly and find that right partner that's going to lease that. That's beautiful. Well, to build that, we know is going to take 2.5, 3 years at best after it's gone through the process here. So we've got to entitle the right pieces of property to be able to do that.
And
I
we've
think
got
we
the
can.
same thing at Southern Post with
So-
90,000 square feet of office.
Absolutely.
That
When
was
they
in-
came
yeah,
in,
So I'm just pointing
30,000
out that
originally,
this is
yeah.
consistent
that's consistent.
throughout the
Absolutely.
city of Roswell.
Yeah.
I think the Southern Post was originally forecasted 30,000. They had so much demand, they jumped it to
Right.
70,000. I also,
That's
as we were talking earlier, I also read the other day where Alpharetta, right on 400, there's a developer building a spec Class A office building with no tenants.
Wow. Where is this?
That is,
Where is this?
I forget which exit it is. I forget exactly. I have to pull the article out, but it was a spec building. It was in the Herald, I guess it was. And that's pretty bold, and that's a lot of confidence. And if we could get some of that into the 400 Holcomb Bridge corridor, we would be up and running.
So I was actually told that at Avalon.
It was in Avalon. It was just east of Avalon.
Okay, so the one I'm referring to was in Avalon. What I was told was there was a zoning requirement that for those 80 acres to get the 250 apartments, there was a requirement to have the office built, and so that was actually the first spec office since pretty much the downturn is what I was
That's
told.
significant stuff.
Yeah.
That's a pretty bold move for just a few apartments. I'd say they wanted more office than they did apartments.
There was an article that I circulated about a month ago to the committee, and it was an article that talked about the east side of not only Roswell, but the east side of Alpharetta. And it's having very similar issues with office in particular. They have a big office, they have so much more office space there, but their office is not leasing well on the east side compared to the west side, right?
And the article was about walkability and being able to get to it. So the east side on overall is 18% unoccupied in Alpharetta. That's a high number. So they're struggling
Yeah,
on
they
the
really
east
are.
side of 400, much like we are, except they got more product to struggle with.
I think we're dealing with that in our transportation findings. And we're bumping a time limit. How much time do you need, Amanda?
Yeah, I mean, we need a good 15 minutes.
15, okay. We'll get that.
I'll definitely be listening to this.
No.
recording, yeah.
We're trying to balance everybody's, childcare is the most important thing. So, we will get that. We will get that. So let's dive into transportation. We'll get through transportation and we'll move directly into the character areas, which is going to be the foundation or part of our recommendation from the committee here. So let's we already got into transportation in our discussion a few minutes ago. 75,000 vehicles a day on the west side of 400, 45,000 vehicles a day on the east side, 75,000 in and out, on and off of 400. We have a tremendous impact on 400 interchange. Fortunately, the city and GDOT have defined a solution to that, hopefully, and that's the two bridges, the revision of the interchange, and the extension of Big Creek project. So that to us is incredibly valuable, and we were very supportive of that because we believe that's going to not only relieve a lot of the congestion that keeps our area less shoppable, but also increase capacity to some extent to allow for more significant development of the east side. And I'm hoping that we're going to take advantage of that. Plus, with the MARTA station going on the southeast corner of 400, that's going to be an incredibly different intersection, and I think that's going to be tremendously valuable for the east side economy. Let's move just a little bit faster. And just to build on what we've talked about a few minutes ago, the resident vision survey, we're on page 6, identified some terribly defined terms about Holcomb Bridge Corridor. It was called the number one problem in Roswell, East Roswell. They called it suburban blight. They called it. I think some of the comments were in 3 o'clock in the morning, so I got to give it something. They were doing something else maybe, but it did conclusively identify several problems in transportation: walkability, pedestrian safety, bicycle, shortage of sidewalks, embarrassing dirt paths along the main roadways that have been there for decades, lack of efficient lights and signage. Basically, the view that our residents have is that the Holcomb Bridge corridor is not a good place to shop. It does not correspond with the high-end residential subdivisions, the pristine subdivisions that people say that they live in, and it's a night and day contrast. And that was a point that was made very clear through hundreds and hundreds of responses in that vision survey in 2017. So, what we've done, in addition to everything else we've talked about, the high traffic, the shoppability issues, we've recommended some pretty bold changes to the Holcomb Bridge corridor on the east side. We feel that it should, the corridor, and most of this is east of Old Alabama, that it should have a Parkway Village scale. To me, that wasn't very clear until I got into the comprehensive plan. There's some things we weren't up to. And that means a lot of streetscaping, sidewalks on both sides of the road. We understand that there's some issues, there's some real problems of the sidewalk or the Parkway Village scale, because most of Holcomb Bridge is not like the west side of Roswell with the horse fences and so forth, which was built more recently than Holcomb Bridge. Holcomb Bridge has a legacy of what it is. So whatever we do to upscale the corridor, we have to retrofit it in some way, probably with the easements and so forth. I'm not into the engineering part of it, but this, to put the Parkway Village scale is a challenge from a transportation standpoint, but it is what it is. You know, that wasn't our challenge. And so we need streetlights along Holcomb Bridge all the way down the road of like design, sidewalks on both sides, on the north side, 8-foot multimodal pathways, and on the south side all the way to the river. We need landscape mediums where we can, crosswalks that are bold, well marked, and safer. We need pedestrian bridges. Pedestrian bridges have been prescribed for Holcomb Bridge for 15 years. And we need one at Old Alabama Holcomb Woods Parkway across Holcomb Bridge Road, and we need one on Eves Road area across Holcomb Bridge Road to create more walkability, which is absolutely essential. I know that we just had a few approved on where it was Peachtree Corners. Peachtree Corners just had one approved.
Peachtree Corners, and it's connecting the Forum across Peachtree Industrial to their shopping area on the other side.
Paid for by Georgia DOT.
And the theory here is to connect the north side and the south side, which brings us down into the river. So if you think about our strengths, one of the Roswell strengths is, and uniqueness, is that you've got this river and you've got your parks. And so how do you connect those, especially in that particular node of the Centennial node, where it's a highly civic node, which we're going to talk about momentarily.
Right.
And how do you connect that north side and south side, where you've got the elementary school and the library, East Roswell Park, and the high school and the middle school. So how do you make that so it's an area that can be more communal? And that bridge really becomes important, especially to bikers. We know how important biking is in the Roswell community. I mean, being able to connect all of that and bring you down to the river is really, really important. And that bridge would be instrumental.
That touches partly on our character areas, which we're going to get into in a few minutes in terms of the Centennial area. But the transportation issues is that we have to have trails connecting throughout the east side. There's an old map of trails throughout the entire east side of Roswell in the Holcomb Bridge Road East Roswell Vitalization Study up there, 2005, which has an entire map of trails proposed for East Roswell. It was never adopted, but it's a good place to start. And so it's on the 2005 study on page 15. So we think that's important. We think that, as we mentioned earlier, we think the 400 bridge crossings need to have character designs, which Ron mentioned earlier, because it's the gateway to Roswell, like the Encore Park in Alpharetta. It's such a character announcement in terms of where you're going into that North Point economic zone. I think it's important that we have not only the 400 bridge across in terms of Holcomb Bridge, but also the other bridges. They need to represent a character of Roswell, and I think it's important that we invest accordingly in those areas. And Mike already said he had to leave, so good luck. Signage improvement. It's amazing how little signage we have on the east side to announce where the river highlights are, where the parks are, points of interest. It's absolutely astounding the lack of signage we have. You can't even find Roswell on 400, except in one exit ramp. It doesn't take you to Roswell. It takes you to Peachtree Corners. It takes you someplace else. And we think that's absolutely necessary to have more localized signage. When you exit southbound on exit 7, when they've expanded that exit to 4 lanes, two going to the west, 2 going to the east, there was a sign on the right-hand side, Roswell that way. They moved it to the left side, so even the people turning left, it said Roswell to the right, which is uncanny, because it appears that Roswell doesn't even exist for 5.1 miles east of 400, which is just not acceptable. And it's been that way for a long time. It needs to change. The bridge on Riverside, we think, likely needs to be rebuilt. It was built in 1958. It's a hazardous bridge listed on the transportation reports. It also inhibits the turn up to Roswell, in direction to Roswell from Riverside. It's a terrible way to get across there, and it's going to be a more east-west corridor, and I think to rebuild that bridge and redo it is an extremely important priority. Sidewalks sidewalks along Big Creek Park probably need to be provided. There's no sidewalk access to the Big Creek Park off of Old Alabama. Dogwood needs to have sidewalks to Riverside. So that's a general. Also, I forgot to mention that we need sidewalks, as Amanda said, with the bridge crossing, Eves Road and Fouts Road. Fouts Road goes to the park, East Roswell Park. There's no sidewalks taking you to the park all the way from Holcomb Bridge. It needs to have sidewalks from across Holcomb Bridge, down Fouts Road to the park, and through the park and connecting to Eves Road. It's just sensible. It doesn't make any sense. And then, of course, you need connectivity to the river, which Eves Road has. So those are just some short areas in terms of transportation. Expensive, yes, but necessary, we believe so. Any questions about transportation? I'm sorry to move so fast. There's a lot of content. We've got about an hour and a half and childcare.
Okay, I've got her covered. We're good.
Okay. Now you tell me.
You're talking.
Okay. I didn't think you would look worried. Okay. Now, character areas. If I'm going too fast, stop me. I'm trying to cover a lot of stuff. Okay. Character areas, I think this is probably one of the most important concerns to the residents of East Roswell, because it also involves the proliferation of rental apartments, and some of the other feelings that the old lifestyle that we've had on the east side, where we have all these large planned subdivisions built back in the 80s and 90s, 70s even, the lifestyle is being threatened. And so what we have on the east side is what is called, in terms of the planning documents, suburban residential. And I may be using some of these terms a little loosely, and I apologize if I am. But suburban residential appears to me to be predicated in large subdivisions on the east side that are single-family owner-occupied homes that were built many decades ago, and many continue to be built. And that's where a lot of our population base came from. That's where a lot of our tax revenues come from, and that's where our lifestyle comes from. About 70% of our land area on the east side, and again, that's a loose number, is tied up in these large suburban residential subdivisions. And that is our lifestyle, and that is valued extensively. The problem that residents have expressed vehemently in the last several years is that they feel threatened by the continued building of renter-occupied apartment complexes. And I'm just putting it on the table because that basically is in the survey, and I got to put it on the table. We feel that, again, the moratorium is appropriate. Short-term solutions and the long-term have to be defined. But the residents have made that extremely clear, and we didn't have the ability to conduct a lot of community outreach programs because we didn't have the resources, but I'm sure that hasn't changed any in terms of it. So let's look at how the east side, east of Old Alabama, or actually east side Roswell, Holcomb Bridge Road, should be broken down. And the studies in 2005 and beyond represent that we look at Holcomb Bridge corridor in 3 distinct geographic nodes. One is the Holcomb Bridge 400 Old Alabama node. The second is a Centennial node, as Amanda mentioned earlier. And the third is the Nesbitt Ferry node. These are very area characteristic sections of East Roswell. And I think that there's a lot of economic identity, lifestyle identities that are housed in these areas. And we believe that the planning that goes forward now on the east side should focus heavily on these 3 character nodes. The first node, and likely from an economic development perspective, as I mentioned earlier, and where we can benefit the most from investing in economic development, is the Holcomb Bridge 400 Old Alabama node. And you wouldn't believe the recommendations that we got in the vision survey as to what could be done in this particular node. It's absolutely creative. And I'll just read some of the comments. These are coming out of the residential surveys. It talks about a destination site, which we use all the time, but this is truly the gateway to Roswell. This is truly at the 400 Holcomb Bridge, Old Alabama node. It is the gateway to the city, the major gateway. And our residents recognize that. They say this is the destination area. And with the MARTA connection, it's a regional market. You'd be surprised how many people, because they have to drive all the way over to Canton Street attraction, how many people say that they believe that the southwest corner and the area around 400 and Holcomb Bridge should be the new Canton Street type attraction with everything, including Class A, Class B offices, experience retail, entertainment facilities, additional fine dining, all kinds of recommendations that you would think that came out of these survey results, and I think it's creative. With Class A offices, Class B offices, upgraded retail, corporate offices, a lot of job creation in the area, and these all came out of the vision survey. So there's a lot of resident creativity on what can be done in that area, and I think that we should somehow tap into that and create some actionable development or redevelopment planning around that. I enjoyed reading it. Any questions about that? You can read some of the details that are in the report. It was a breath of fresh air kind of read it. That the residents feel that way. Okay. Let's see, where we go. Oh, and we've also talked about the Centennial node. I'm getting ahead of myself here. The Centennial node is the community institutional center of East Roswell, which, as most community members feel, it's about 2 miles east of 400. It's bisected by Eves Road. It has a lot of residential density, both apartment and government offices, or in the library, the park. it's a good area for an activity center, so let's go.
You can pull up the slides, switch to the slides that are up there. The slides, it says Centennial. Thank you. Okay, so, and as we know, and I hate that my back is this way, as we know, the node that we just discussed in terms of being at 400 in Old Alabama is vital from an economic standpoint, but it's not available today. And so what we are focusing on right now is the Centennial node, which there is room opportunity for some redevelopment, and it is available today. And so how do we kind of look at that node as to what its current landscape is and what could it be into the future? And so we had a subcommittee that looked at this. And when we think about the strengths in Roswell, we think about parks, trails, arts, river, connectivity, and community. Would anybody disagree that that is kind of our strengths in Roswell? Okay. So that's kind of what we focused on. And if you're kind of thinking back, you always kind of think, strengthen your strength. You know, go back to your strength and how do we make it better and where do we find that there are gaps? So if you go to the next slide. Today's Centennial node, as Trent mentioned, is kind of defined. It really is a civic node. And I know it's a little hard to see on the slides, but these arrows kind of highlight River Eaves and Hillside Elementary, Holcomb Bridge Middle School, Centennial High School, East Roswell Park, the new 7 Branches Park, a post office, a library. It's civic in nature. And this is right where the current Kohl's vacant property sitting on 15.5 acres is located. And so that's where is the availability that we're going to talk about and the opportunity for development. So if you go to the next slide, this is the current zoning is CX zoning, which is a mixed use, which is supposed to consist primarily of commercial and retail. However, it doesn't necessarily give a specific number and percentage in that definition of what that looks like. So if you go to the next slide, this kind of highlights everything that was on that previous slide within 1.5 miles. So when we talk about walkability and connectivity within a 1.5 mile radius, you have all these great governmental resources, never mind all of the residential between Martin's Landing and Horseshoe Bend and the other neighborhoods and apartments that are located within this tight 1.5 to 2 mile radius. It becomes a good, strong opportunity for some walkability. So when we go to the next slide, the feedback on what is needed based on all these surveys that Trent has been referencing is it needs to be destination-based. We need a city center type community hub, boutique commercial, because we know the big box retailers aren't successful here for all of the reasons we've discussed in terms of people leaving the area, but we could have some boutique commercial, and certainly food it will be successful here if we have a destination base. It consistently comes up in the 2017 questionnaire about the lifestyle community center wanting more trails and sidewalks, and they want the aesthetics to be improved. And so if you go to the next slide, the 2005 study echoes the same exact thing that we're seeing in 2017. So when you think back, you're thinking, I'm looking at a study that's 15 years old in 2005, is very relevant if you go back and read it, because all of the things that we saw in 2005 were echoed again in 2012 and 2017 from the resident standpoint. And so this is highlighting continuously this need for something that's destination-based, something that brings people to the east side of Roswell, because we know general shopping and retail is not going to be successful. So if you go to the next slide, we'll talk about what we think the Centennial Node of tomorrow looks like, and Trent touched on this with the landscaping and streetscapes. We want it to be similar to what we see on the west side of Roswell when you're going down, Crossville, and you see the horse fencing and the beautiful landscaping. If you go to Windward Parkway, you see the same. And when you come to East Roswell, it's a lot to be desired on what that looks like. We also want to talk about special events. We believe this node is a perfect node to host special events in. And when you look at the special events that are hosted in Roswell, I think it's 5% or 3%, under 5% that is hosted on the east side of Roswell. Most 95% of special events in Roswell are hosted across from 400. Yet we have a significant amount of residents. That's got to change. It's got to be something that we've got to look at. And we believe this node could potentially be a great opportunity to do that. So the next slide just provides some examples of what it looks like today on the left-hand side and what we'd like it to look like on the right-hand side. And again, with the idea of improving the aesthetics improves the ability for even developers and office seekers, office users to want to be a part of that in term from how that's
Came out of the 2005 study.
that came out of 2005.
That was in
study.
2005 that was presented to us.
The next slide came out of my camera. And this is when, at the holidays on the left-hand side in Sandy Springs, who's done a great job, I think, with their development. And you've got holiday decor, you've got flags that go up, and on the right side, although I know we just put some flags up, thank you, Marie. On the right side, we have vacant flags, and we don't have anything on the right side. We have no holiday decor on the east side of Roswell, and it just leaves, again, a lot to be desired, like, from that standpoint. Again, aesthetics make a big deal in terms of the perception of that side of the city. So, what we believe, because it's available today and is most urgent, is the ability to look kind of in this particular Kohl's Center site. It was currently under contract with an apartment developer who will have to do some sort of mixed use, but there, again, a lot of opportunity there. But the 90-day moratorium has been implemented this week. Well, at the time we presented these slides, it was that week for the mixed use, unless there was 75% of commercial. And the opportunity requires urgent, out-of-the-box thinking and potential partnership when we look at this site. If we miss this site for redevelopment, there will be no other site that's currently available today to redevelop. So one of the things I know when we looked at Target, and when the Target was approved, there wasn't any other options to consider at the time. And so that was a great option in the sense that we've had vacant pads for 12 years with a lot of debris sitting up there, so let's look at a development there. There wasn't another option. Here we'd like to present an option to consider that we can invest in this side of the city. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say two things. One, it is zoned CX. Multifamily would be a conditional. It had to come to the city for approval on that, so we feel like, we do have an option. The one thing I wanted to quickly say, time is of the essence. I went to a BizNow North Fulton event recently, and we had Steve Stroud representing Roswell. We had Alpharetta, Milton, Sandy Springs, all the leaders of the cities talking about redevelopment and uses. A common theme that they said, and you can't make this up, they said the city has to be thinking ahead, getting ahead of the developers, and they have to have the courage, and they said this, to control the site, control the zoning, and if you have an idea, then you can work with that distressed property, that property is functionally obsolete, and get with them before it gets too far down the road. They all said that, Steve. I mean, and that's what we're getting at. We have ideas here. We're only going to give you our ideas, but we hope it won't get too far down the road. We can get ahead of it.
Perfect. So then the next slide highlights, again, out of 2005, this bridge was designed to go over in this area at this node to connect Eves Road on the south side of Holcomb Bridge to the north side. And so there actually previously used to be a pad on that what's now currently known as the Aldi site, it's 2 acres. There was supposed to be a pad there and the residents of Alstead were informed of this, that this bridge would be able to connect across Holcomb Bridge into this pad.
And if you talk to the broker who's selling it with CBRE right now, Aldi, they've had no success. It's listed for $2 million. But they emphatically know that there was a pad site, and they had to pay money to get rid of the pad site for the bridge. It's obvious. Everybody knows and thinks that there should be a bridge here. And even people have paid money in support of the idea or to get rid of the idea. So it's so obvious this is the place where a bridge should go.
And it would connect into the 7 Branches Park that's been recently purchased by Roswell over to this area and connects the south side and north side. So once you have the connectivity and the walkability, the next slide in terms of what we think could happen is adding a Roswell activity complex. And so this complex, we want you to think a little outside of the box. And we go back to our original slide, which said Parks and Rec is our absolute strength. And so we would like Roswell to consider investing, whether it's in public-private partnership, or just Roswell's investing in it into this complex. If you
Or
go
through a CID.
or through a
Yeah,
CID.
CID.
However, lots of creativity ways that we can do this. But if you go out to places like Colorado, when we say think outside the box, let's get outside of Georgia. This is an example. There's a Miller Activity Center located in Castle Rock, Colorado. And if you're out in Colorado between Denver and Colorado Springs, these activity complexes, also known as field houses, are popping up all along in each little town, all up and down the interstate. And this example of one that we'd like to kind of show you of what this could be is a gap in what we offer in Roswell, and it's also a gap that was offered in the North Fulton area, and we believe can be destination-based, which study after study suggests we need a destination base in Roswell in order to pull people in so they spend their money here and eat their food here and do a little bit of their shopping here as well. And we believe this could be the answer to do that. It would be an activity complex that would be focused on bringing in people of all ages. Will be a heavy family base. I can tell you as a parent of 3 kids and very active kids, I know this could be successful. When they opened theirs in the first year, they hosted 700 birthday parties in their complex. And their complex includes a 4-lane lap pool, 25-yard lap lane pool. If you are a swim mom like I am, you watch Dynamo kids and the high school kids go into swim at 9 p.m. at night. 9 to 11 o'clock at night is when they are training high school kids for their swim meets. If we offered another opportunity for them to swim in a pool that, like a lap pool, that's revenue that can be generated from the schools that they can have in a more reasonable time that they're doing swimming. There's also a leisure pool, so you're bringing in kids all throughout the year in a leisure pool and all times of the day between the young kids and the older kids. We would suggest having dedicated batting cages. Again, batting cages are full around here, and so offering some opportunities here, a children's play structure. We would think some rooms for music classes coming back to our arts, or maybe a room for a small theater where any rehearsals can be hosted or recitals can be hosted for the arts, whether it's singing or instruments. We would suggest having 2 full-size synthetic fields. Roswell has an excellent soccer program in Roswell Santos. And if you're a soccer mom, like I am, you would know that there's not really great options out there for indoor soccer. And you have to travel 45 minutes outside of this area to get to really not great facilities. And so if we offer 2 high-class facilities, Santos, I would venture to say, will be able to support that in offering leagues and things like that, in addition to schools utilizing this, a whole host of things. They have a trampoline park in there. I know we have Sky Zone, so we can discuss that. We can design it in a lot of different ways that meets what we need. We talked about adding rock climbing wall. Indoor tennis courts, there's no indoor tennis courts here. Tennis is huge, as we all know. Pickleball courts is growing rapidly. You have to go to Lifetime Fitness in order to get to indoor tennis courts or some of the country clubs. If you were able to offer that, that would be an amazing resource that Roswell could offer. If you flip to the next slide, this is something, are you online access? Can you click on that link to be able to watch it? I don't know if the sound will come up on it, but.
While that's loading, one comment I want to make, and we're talking about the Centennial Node. Here it comes. But the Centennial Node itself, and what Amanda was talking about, if you look at which is Miller.
Yeah. we just want to give you an example of what that looks like and a little bit of a vision of what we're talking about here. When you think about this type of activity center and connecting it over to East Roswell Park, and then you've got your passing the library along the way, that is a very powerful activity node for Roswell, and I think unsurpassed in North Fulton.
And the point that we so clearly saw in the committee was, you know, in any real estate or development or theory, it's balance and consistency and homogeneousness. We've got the library on one side, the high school on another, we've got an elementary school on one side. You know, this, you know, it really is a civic area, and we really felt like this was consistent and balanced and a great benefit to the community.
Correct. So if you flip to the next slide, I've spent many time, you know, a couple hours on the phone with the gentleman who runs and it's run, this one happens to be run out of the Parks and Rec Department in Castle Rock, but this is just an example. It's an investment, right? But it's going to sustain itself, and it should with our resident base and the residents around North Fulton in terms of having a resident and a non-resident fee. So you have a daily admission fee, you could do a 20 punch card, you could do a monthly pass, annual pass, kind of thinking like more, you know, sort of like a YMCA, but much better. Because you're going to be more comprehensive and you're going to be meeting the needs of Roswell. So it is an investment that would be made on the front end. And if you go to the next slide, there's lots of options that we suggest that we could explore in terms of funding that. For today, what we would want to know, and not necessarily today, but for this going forward on this recommendation, is that we'd want to know that this is worth investigating and that there should be some group that gets together in order to do a feasibility and see how this could potentially play out into the future versus actually getting caught up in exactly the numbers and dollars. We certainly don't know what that would be. But if something like this would be the prime location to do something like this and meets gaps in its destination base, which is what we've heard consistently from all of the studies that is required for East Roswell. And it would be unique and different than anything else in North Fulton because you're not trying to be the mini Avalon or be this or this. You're trying to set our own and be bold and be different and set our own path here. And we believe that it could be a great option worth consideration.
Even on the private side, we feel that it's like it's our Kobe Bryant site. You know, this is a Mamba sports facility, and we have the Hawks, we have the Braves, we have the Falcons, we have all these athletes living around here. And if you look at the Mamba Sports Arena in LA when Kobe passed away, and it was on TV every minute. I mean, that happened in downtown, that happened in LA in a dense area, and they created this with public and private opportunities. And the extreme athletes that are practicing and working out in there, along with just the average person, athlete or something, it was amazing. So we really feel that there's all kinds of opportunities.
Okay.
Questions?
Okay. Let's move on. Only 2 more hours. Thank you.
That's great.
We're still on the character area, page 11. And what we just heard was a representation of the Centennial Node. Before that, we had the Holcomb Bridge 400 Old Alabama node. And the next node and the last node for the character area is the Nesbitt Ferry node. Now, Nesbitt Ferry and Holcomb Bridge is a much smaller area economically. The northeast corner of that intersection is Johns Creek. It has a lot of retail in there. It seems to be doing fairly well. But based on the documentation of the studies we've looked at so far, there are some additional things that look appropriate for development in this Nesbitt Ferry node. Elderly housing because of the demographics, perhaps medical practices, maybe doctor's office parks, a lot of different types of possibilities for Class B, and even some Class B on the south side towards the wastewater treatment facility. That's all open land. I don't know what ever has been planned for that, but it could be very useful for small business parks. Probably not retail, but certainly a lot of opened, lifestyle-driven, with a park right next to it in terms of the Chattahoochee. It might be very good space for smaller businesses and kind kind of niche markets. Additionally, well, that's pretty much it for the character area. Any questions about the character areas? I know we've gone through it very quickly, but there's a lot of stuff here. Let's go into the community facilities area then. This is not too awfully large. We didn't get into the recreation and parks programs too much, but because we do have an award-winning program here in the city, but there were a couple of points that we wanted to make and recommendations that we want considered. And a lot of it came out of the resident vision survey, again, which was a good survey of the residents. And let me just go through the points that we have listed here. There's a standard in the city of 9 acres allocated per 1,000 residents, with about 40,000 residents on the east side. We're just requesting as to whether or not the east side parks meet that standard. I just thought we all thought that was a kind of a reasonable request, because I don't really know if it does or not. In terms of transportation, I think it would be very helpful if parks and transportation, recreation and parks and transportation coordinated a lot of very effective signage for all of the parks and the locations of interest that we have along the river and the parks and so forth along the roadway, because we really don't have anything that in a classic way represents what we have to offer. And I think it might even create some additional use for the park if we have proper signage and maybe even new residents or rental residents, that there's thousands of people that live in apartment complexes here that may not even be aware of some of our park facilities because they don't pay attention. So I think that signage is extremely important. A little controversial maybe, but the committee felt that at the City Ace Sand Company location next to the river be a good location for a restaurant. So, it'd be great to have dinner by the river. And I don't know what plans there are there, but that was an idea that we felt was worth recommending. We feel that.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. With that, we really like the pathway down by the river. I think that is active, and I think that would only help the visibility and the attraction of that pathway if there was some sort of destination down there, whether it's a restaurant or food trucks or whatever that might be.
Give it a lot more vibe, in terms of the other park down the road, and it would make it a very highly active area, and with a combination of other types, perhaps other food sources too. So it would because it's so busy down there. I mean, if anybody goes down there on a regular basis, on the weekends it is packed. I take my grandson down there. Just can't get him away from there. But anyway, Don White Park we felt needed some upgrade. The baseball fields, I think, on the East Roswell Park probably need to be upgraded. We also mentioned earlier that CVB could increase their funding in terms of advertising and promotion to the east side. I'm not aware of much at all that happens to be invested from that program, and that could also promote our Big Creek Park more effectively, I think. I don't know that we have any promotion from the CVB revenue sources, and I think that might be well worth considering. And then I think that, the last thing under the community facilities is that we have a really large past school facility at our East Roswell Park. That could be more optimized, we think, into a significant community center to add to the vibe of the Centennial Node and the activity in that park area. There's a lot of various types of local area activities that can go on, and I think that Halloween, I had my grandson in there on Halloween, and it's absolutely packed, but there's no reason it couldn't be more active throughout the year for community center issues. That concludes the basic elements of our report. The conclusions that we make is that we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of money that needs to be invested. I think that the challenges that this presents to mayor and council members are significant. There's financial, there's the need to build support or prioritize some of these things. But we really think that it's a valuable set of recommendations. I think our findings are very accurate and certainly conform to all of the studies that Roswell's paid so much for over the years. I think we're right on target. There's nothing in here that we don't feel is appropriate. And so I, on behalf of the committee, respectfully request that the city take a hard look at it. And as I said in my cover letter when I transmitted this, we're perfectly willing to participate in creating actionable strategies for some of these recommendations. I think there's a lot of possible community support that's necessary. I don't think that our community is going to resist most of this in any way whatsoever. Well, maybe some, but but I think it creates a better lifestyle for our residents. I think it creates a better business environment. I believe strongly that the upgrades in Holcomb Bridge Road Corridor, and so too the committee, will do an awful lot to improve the economic viability of East Roswell. I see business failures advertised on Nextdoor frequently, and it just hurts me, because I know there's a lot of businesses out there that are not generating the kind of revenue they should be generating based on the market that they're in. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the retail environment and aesthetics that we provide as a city. It's part of our economic infrastructure. And I think it's past time that the city invest heavily in the Holcomb Bridge Corridor, the Centennial Node, and especially in the 400 Holcomb Bridge Old Alabama Corridor. I think we've left, as the studies have said year after year after year, decade after decade, we're losing a lot of lost economic growth potential by not making more use out of the Holcomb Bridge 400 interchange. It's just, and the residents know that. They may complain about some of the larger the prior developments, but I think our residents realize that that area has to be more to us economically. And it's going to affect our taxes, it's going to improve our tax setting. Anyway, any questions?
On behalf of the
You shouldn't have any questions.
I have a question for you, Trent. I actually, just a statement, just want to thank Trent for all his hard work.
A lot of hours.
Yeah.
Yes.
Your commitment is unbelievable. Your passion for East Roswell and the amount of work you've done here is incredible. And pulling out all the back information and then putting this all together.
Thank you. I'd like to.
I'd like to echo that to all y'all. Thank you so much for your time. It's not easy in everybody's busy lives to do what y'all did for the love of the city. I, for one, everything in here, if we could do it tomorrow, let's do it. I'm all for everything in here. This is great. I think there's what you said. It's a big challenge. We've got a big challenge ahead of us, and if it was easy, everybody do it. So I think we talked about. I'm not sure if they know yet, but hopefully engaging this committee or a committee for the following to continue if you all would stay on and help and even add some places. I don't know, Gary, this might be a question for you and or the members. I don't know how much access, I know y'all been drinking from a fire hose, but how much access you've had to staff as a whole to go through things, because I'm learning now as liaison to Parks and Rec in the first month and a half that I'm in, how much things as a pool costs, how much things, what that looks like to operate each and every year, how much time, buildings, staffing these things, simple things is lights in these buildings and stuff like that I never even thought of to the minute level. So I think digging down into these different elements as we go forward with staff will help us realize, hey, look, here's the low-hanging fruit that we can move forward on, and here's our goals. And that might take some things such as bond referendums or things like that to get to where we want to go. But I'm excited to dig further into these bold statements y'all made, and really thank you for doing this.
I'd like to add one thing, because that is an important issue in terms of staff resources. We received a tremendous amount of support from community development, Steve and Roswell Inc. and administration. I'm sorry, but we didn't get any real support because of the challenging work schedules that they had from community relations. And I think that as we move forward in developing some actionable strategies for some of these or all of these recommendations, possibly, but it would be good to gain community buy-in, residential buy-in with some of this community relations activity. Because like I said, I don't think any of this is real controversial with a lot of the residents, as long as it was free. but I do think that's a part where that's a part we really probably need to work on. I think as we begin to. Sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't. Look this way.
No, I just want to thank you all for the time and the energy and passion that you put into it. I had the opportunity to listen into a couple of mornings, and just the knowledge and the energy that's been in the room has just been incredible. So again, thank you all for giving up your time and your Friday mornings to help to invest in the community. I really appreciate that. Again, if we had a broad paintbrush and could just paint all the ideas that you suggested, I would love to see that tomorrow. I'd love to drive home to that. So just a couple of key points. Really excited about the Centennial Node opportunities there, and I would love to see us look right away at looking at the feasibility of doing some sort of public-private partnership on that property, or a community improvement district, just to see what the options, the market feasibility is, and how we can make something positive happen. It's such a civic center and a neighborhood center for the area. I think it would really enrich the whole city. The other thing is the streetscapes and investment and transportation on the street, the pedestrian walkability component. That's something that, in placemaking, that's something I'd really like to see an immediate focus on. Alpharetta has done something similar in planning ahead for the North Point redevelopment. They have done a study for placemaking and walkability. So, and it will give that area its own unique look. They've got the same sort of thing in place with the Alpha Loop, which is designed investing in the infrastructure so that what came on around it is what the community wanted. So, again, we have some opportunities coming up with a comp plan kicking off in March that we'll be able to get some community engagement, and I think as part of that, there's also some plans to master plan part of the Holcomb Bridge area corridor. So I think we've got a lot of opportunities to get community engagement as well as with the town hall coming in. So again, thank you all for the work, and look forward to taking it to the next level.
So, well, before thanking you all for a great job, I would like to let you know that since we talk about Big Creek Park, that on Saturday, April 25th at 8 a.m., we will have our 7th annual Big Creek Quick 6 Enduro. So it's a competition for a mountain bike. It's once a year. A lot of people come from out of town for this competition. So since we mentioned about Big Creek Park, this is an event that is going through the 7 years. So it's something that I would like to promote because all these people coming from out of town will spend money on all the businesses around the Big Creek Park.
What's the date on that? April what?
So April 25th, Saturday, April 25th, 8 a.m. So it's a whole day event. And I hope that the city will help to promote this event because, like I said, again, this will totally benefit all the businesses around Big Creek Park. So saying that, the commercial. So the next one is, okay, thank you so much. And was a great job identifying the different nodes. That is critical, so help us to focus on the characteristic and the needs and opportunities for each of the different nodes. And creating, I love to hear that everybody is in agreement to create destination places. We talk about barriers, geographical barriers that we all know, but destination places is what bring people to spend time and money on those places. And like I always say, the extreme destination place in this country and in the world is Disney World. Orlando, many years ago, was nothing. nothing, it was just swamp. And see, all of a sudden became the destination place of the world. So having destination places go over any barrier that you can even think or imagine, geographically or any kind of. So the key here, again, is to find the right destination place that will attract people no matter what river cross or not cross the river. So again, I'm so happy to hear that. I'm so happy to hear innovative ideas. I hear a lot of aquatic center, and this is on the idea of having aquatic center in this area, on the what we call the civic area. So I think that and it's great, and I would really like to see the committee, hopefully keep working together and helping us to bring and be proactive. Again, we need to start being proactive and not reactive. Not just whatever seat on this side is what we take because nothing else came before. We have to have a vision, we have to have initiative, and we have to be proactive looking for those destination places to bring to East Roswell and anywhere else in Roswell. But in this case today, we're talking about East Roswell. So thank you again. I hope that you can continue working together and helping us to redevelop East Roswell.
I just want to thank you as well, and also the timing of this, I think, is so perfect. We've just seated, or we're in the process of seating a new DDA, and at least the Holcomb Bridge and 400 corridor is within the DDA boundary, so that's going to be a wonderful opportunity for the DDA to be involved there. And I think it actually even maybe goes a little bit further east. I don't know where the boundary ends, but they may be able to address some of the things further east. But you guys,
almost all the way to the Home Depot, almost at the Home Depot.
So it's exciting that there's going to be opportunities, but I know how much work you guys put into this. This is great. Thank you so much.
Ron and I can carry that into the DDA. I mean, right? Because we're hopefully going to be getting into that.
Well, and I thanked you to start off with, and we are running out of time here, and I would like to open it up to the public. So is there anyone in the public that would like to speak? Yes, sir. Please come forward. I'll need you to speak into a microphone so we can get on the record. Thank you.
Yeah, Lee Fleck, Martin's Landing. I had the opportunity to come to several of the meetings. I'm just thrilled with what you've generated over this period of time. The question I have is, you mentioned, first of all, the first public notification of this meeting was on Nextdoor 2 days ago. Nobody knew it was happening over in East Roswell. I only saw the printed documents today, and I never would have thought that you'd have this report before the meeting. Normally in Roswell, all the reports come out after the meetings are presented. Okay, that's SOP. So I was very pleased to see that, and of course I didn't have much chance to digest it. But now you mentioned that there's going to be an open mic presentation sometime in March over in
March
East Roswell.
2nd, 6:30 p.m., East Roswell Area Park.
And it's about this presentation?
It will be this presentation again.
How
And
are we going to publicize that so people over in East
we'll
Roswell
start
find out about it?
publicizing it right now. And it will have an opportunity for Q&A after they do their presentation.
Good. I will certainly publicize
Mayor?
it.
Yes,
Some
The
of
way I
the
know
key
it.
people, we won't be here for those days to present that.
I apologize for that. I wanted to get it out to the community because the community is really, really looking forward to this.
Can't we, I mean, we'd be able
Um,
to do a good job if we can't present it.
I believe that maybe your chair can present.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can, yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, retired. Hey, not yet.
I'm retired, so I have time.
Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak? Well, again, thank you all very much. You've done a fabulous job. We certainly don't want to disband the group, and so I'm hoping and looking forward to continued involvement by the committee. You've done a fabulous job, and like I said at the beginning of the meeting, I don't think any of us were expecting this type of work product to come out. We had high hopes, but thank you all very much.
Can I say one more thing? I think that it took courage for the governing body to say, tell us what you want. Tell us what's wrong. I think that's courageous, and I think that is fabulous leadership from everybody. I've never seen that done that openly before. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.